Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Successfully Unsuccessful Podcast. And I'm your host, Josh Dietrich. I'm excited today for having a friend of mine, a believer in Christ, and fellow business partner, Chris Bjorling. Why don't you say hello and introduce yourself quick?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Chris, and really looking forward to being here. Thanks for having me. So I'm a serial entrepreneur like Josh here. I've started restaurants, coffee shops, do a lot in real estate, have a real estate brokerage, an investment group, and a lending company that we do together.
You are busy.
Yes. And 3 kids.
3 kids,
Yes.
multiple businesses.
Mhm.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if we go back to the early stages of your career, I'm sure going to school, but coming out of school, tell us about what your definition of success was.
hmm
Thinking about your career and what's next, what would you say?
Yeah. So I was an accounting major. So I was
Uh,
very much like numbers, business driven. And so anything you could put on an income statement and balance sheet, basically. So
Numbers, you're a numbers guy.
yes. So making money, assets, nice house, nice cars, things like that were initially my definitions of success, like going through college.
Yeah, totally. I think it's so easy to just see the world as your oyster and I'm
Mhm.
gonna go make my name, make something of it. And I think there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but the experience I had going through the learnings is really what helped me change and really re-understand and refocus what that definition meant. So
Yeah.
very cool. Thanks for sharing. So if you were to go back now and reframe what you say, what would your definition of success be now? You said that's how it was. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming you view that differently now. You're how old? And maybe tell us about the success you've had, but then more importantly, how you really redefine success.
Yeah. So I'm 36 now. So I've been in the business world for about 14 years.
Okay.
And I think in those early years, it still was very like money motivated,
Mm.
very driven. I think as you get and you achieve some amount of success, and I'm not saying I'm the most successful person, depends on your
Depends
definition.
on your definition.
In terms of once you start achieving some amount of financial success and the risks that you take as an entrepreneur or business owner, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, I just need more. I just need more. I just need more. And because you think, well, if I get to here, I'll be happy. Or if I get to here. And what you realize is that the fence post just continually moves, right?
Yeah.
Two, probably the biggest things that have changed the definition of success for me are one, becoming a Christian and
Mm.
loving Jesus and viewing the world differently. And the second thing is getting married and having kids.
Mm.
Because that, I would say now, a big definition of why I work or what I do is actually to ensure that I have time. Time is probably one of the biggest in terms of if you're thinking of a metric,
Mhm.
time to invest into other people, including my wife and my children. And then time to also hopefully do the plan that the Lord has for me and for my life
Yeah.
and hopefully
That's
make
good.
disciples, spread the good news of Jesus.
It's funny you say that. We have this view of resources, right? And money is the one that appeals to us. But as we obtain it, we go, it doesn't really do for me, but I'm spending all this time. I want time back. So
Mhm.
we shift our perspective with time and how finite it really is, right? I think we're taught in scripture to number our days. So if you lived a successful life, success is really the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose, right?
Mhm.
So at the end of your life, you get there. How do you know it was successful? How would you measure that? Or what would people say?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I have the full answer, but I view it now in the terms of the commission that we are given in Genesis when
Mm.
God creates and he puts Adam and Eve in the garden and then he directs them to tend and multiply and they
Oh,
name the animals and all that. And I think there's a great book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn. A lot of people are familiar with it, but a lot of it talks about how creation is not a stagnant thing in that God created, but then he asks us to participate in
mm,
creation.
that's good.
And so we talk about there's the mandate to continue to create and cultivate. And so I think when hopefully my life is over and it's well done, good and faithful servant, I think the idea is that hopefully our participation in the creation not only helped create like here on earth, but it created things that matter in heaven, which would mean it gave people opportunity to evangelize to one another. It hopefully built other people up. It created more disciples, like that multiplication. And whether that's through providing a foundation of jobs that people can support their family and then do those things, or whether it's direct evangelism within your work, or all of it interconnected, because I believe that God put us here to work and evangelize through our work. that is hopefully like when I get to heaven, my hope is that there are all these things that happen that I'm not even aware of,
Mm.
but were brought out of the relationships and the achievements or the efforts that, you know, you put forward every day, and just kind of being faithful in the call that God has on your life.
So cool. Like it's thinking about beyond just today, but how we can impact each day and living with a purpose. And I think purpose is a big word too. Like, how do you define that? But I feel like when you go back and say the mandate in the beginning, God created, let's stop there. Right. And that if we're made in his image and God's a creator and he's given us this world to use its resources and subdue it, that calls on us to partner with him, as you said, and create things. And so the instruction for us is to love God and love others and love your neighbor as yourself, but tell the world of his good news. So that creates more of a purpose. How do you believe in, as you've grown, talk about us coming to faith and where that distinction happened, and why you mentioned the worldview of success versus maybe the worldview now. What was that story coming to faith that connected those dots, that there's something more here that I'm missing and I just can't obtain it by buying it?
Yeah. I would actually say when that switch happened wasn't like the moment I became a believer. Like
Mm,
it took time. I became a believer in college, and
mm,
then,
okay.
have been learning ever since. And it actually, I feel like that switch happened when actually we had a lot taken from us. Because in my 20s, we were grinding hard, opening these businesses, and we were seeing some amount of success. And we'd built up this real estate portfolio. And then all of a sudden, we were blindsided with this lawsuit that initially I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then over time, it snowballed and ended
Oh,
up being
man.
really like you start here and then it like really brings you down. And what you realize is that like the Lord gives and the Lord truly does take away.
Mm,
And not as a punishment, but as a way to make sure that your heart and your spirit are in the right place, and that you're not putting your hope and trust in like physical things.
totally get it.
And it was painful emotionally, and it made me really check myself in terms of what am I putting my hope and my trust and my happiness in. And when you have things taken away, it helps you almost reset and realize like what's important. And so that vision of whether I'm times of plenty or times of want, like the Lord is my rock and he will be with me forever. That those are the times that actually I feel like is the most growth, and make actually made that switch in my mind. And what was interesting, just to continue this on, is that happened 2017, 2018, and we were coming out of that. And then all of a sudden COVID happened, and we're running these restaurants and these coffee shops. We have over 100 employees. And all of a sudden it's literally like in a day we're shut down.
Oh, no kidding.
And
Yeah.
I think had I not gone through the experience back in like 2017, 2018, it would have been very traumatic, incredibly stressful. And COVID was stressful in other ways. But I had this sense of calm and peace that no matter what happens, the Lord is with me and he will carry us through. So it was like that, going through that experience helped mold and shape me. And you wonder, like, why does God put me through those
Right.
things? And it's, and a lot of times you don't learn on this side of heaven why that happens. But I feel like very much, God was preparing me
Yeah.
for
Right.
this to
I love
happen. And
that. You start
so,
seeing the things maybe you prayed for, or hoped for, and you see the areas in your life changing, and the way you're able to help others and your view of life and the ability to serve, like all of that. I feel like you start to give away of yourself and take on more of what God is and love. And so what's always fascinating to me though is business guys, that it's like you can be successful and have a crappy marriage. You can be successful in business and have kids that hate you. You can be successful in the way you are able to build and think and create, but every single day, you struggle with pornography or alcohol. And so it's so wild that I can think about this trouble in the world and it hurts. But if I were to think about a framework, and this is part of what's amazing about business, is like we have EOS, right? We have various methods and all sorts of resources and books that can help our businesses thrive and flourish when they're sick, when they're healthy, what to
mhm.
do in circumstances. But what do we have that for our own lives? And if we were to treat our lives or call it a lifestyle design as maybe like building a business or starting a business, right? Because it'd be crazy without a business plan. It'd be crazy without a vision and a mission, right? It'd be crazy to not be grounded by core values. It would be ridiculous to not set goals, but then having habits that will help you get there or discipline to say that's good. What have you seen in your life that has helped create discipline or habits or keep you oriented on, let's separate business for a second and then we have life and we stumble through it, right? What are some resources or tools or habits, things that you've used that have helped you create a better life that impacts others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a constant struggle because the natural inclination of the heart is towards like sin and towards wanting to do it yourself or go it alone. There's this visual that a mentor of mine taught me, but it's like when you open your hand, you have to like actually like intentionally open your hand to remain open-handed, like what God has for you. Because if you naturally relax, your fingers kind of crumple and you want to just like grab. And I feel like that's what my heart is, that like, I just want to take the reins and I want to do it and fix it.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah. I think as men in general, I think there's inside of us to be protectors and do that. But it takes active work to actually open your hands and say, okay,
totally.
What God has for me. And the biggest thing is really other men, believers who have been battle tested, who truly are filled with the Spirit, that can come alongside and essentially mentor me. That is because in this world, there's not a playbook from college or school growing up. Like I liken it to, you learn how to essentially do the most random things in school, but they never teach you how to file your tax. Right? It's like, if we could get some more like actual practical training, basics. And that's, I feel like, what happens in the world. Like there is no playbook, and the natural playbook is just sin and Satan and the prince of the powers of this world. And so you have to actively seek out to try to say, okay, I need some help reorienting my mind, reorienting my spirit towards more heavenly and towards God. And if you just naturally let it take its course, then you find yourselves going into dark places. And those are where the sin struggles of like pornography and lust and alcohol and drugs and even just greed and all of those things that come along with it, that the world is there for. And so the biggest thing is really, I'm part of a group of guys that are older than me, and we meet on a regular basis, and they really pour into my life to help me recenter.
That's great. And I'm guessing that's one helpful aspect that you have, one tool in the toolbox, right? Because I believe we're part of the same ministry, and that's helped shape a lot of things for me and having men to rely on. God gave us community for a reason. Scripture tells us that we need men or people to help sharpen each other, right? As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. So what are the things that you've had to put in place to self-regulate? There's activities that we do, there's habits, there's things we shouldn't do, or we have guardrails around. We have our spouses, we have our kids that watch us. Like that stuff is in the constant. It's always moving. Our life is 24 hours like that, right? So how do you stay grounded day by day?
Yeah. And I would love to say I'm the most like disciplined person. I watch these Instagram videos where it's, I get up at 4 a.m. every day. You know?
I'm like, in some ways I'm like, you should do that. But then I'm like, wait.
Yeah, I can't. I have 3 kids. There's no way. I got to get sleep. So there's like rhythms in our life. And so honestly, being a part of our church and being a part of a small group is like absolutely critical too. We do Wednesday nights at church. We protect it. We meet with our small group then. And it's just
more community.
For more
what
community.
Do you know?
Yeah. So it's like Sundays obviously are a staple, but it's like, I can't go Sunday to Sunday and not have any sort of like filling time.
Right. Like that's like having dinner, once a week.
Right. Yeah. And that's where it's like that Wednesday is so important. But then it really is like daily making sure you are spending time with God, praying in the Word. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm in the Word for hours a day. Like literally it's 5 minutes being able to pull up just the app and being able to be like, okay, refocus my mind. But it's tough to find time when you're like, you feel so busy, you have kids, you have the pressures of just family and work. But my wife has been super helpful too. If it was in and of myself, I'd be a workaholic. I'd work all the time. And she's been very helpful in just training me about, you need to take time off. It's okay to take time off. I think that's the other thing is I used to not think it was like okay not to work. And so having a spouse helping with that balance helps too.
So let me get this straight. You're driving around, you're not gonna just keep driving around when you're lost. You're gonna stop and ask for directions.
Yes, that's a
So,
good analogy.
like you're
Men don't
talking
really
about.
do that, though.
I mean, I remember distinctly as a kid, my mom saying, "Eh, you got to pull over, just ask someone."
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's right around here. And that's just our wiring. But for me, I agree with you. Discipline is a very tough word. I don't really believe that I learned it growing up. I wasn't disciplined in a way to create discipline or good habits. Okay, brushing your teeth, washing your face, those are great things. Those are habits that we form early on. But if you start thinking about the compounding of other habits that form, the daily time in the Word, it continues to grow and live inside you. And what's amazing is, we talk about the Word as a lamp unto our feet. So if we're walking, how good is light if it's literally just on our feet?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the blindness we have of the world. We don't know we need that light just right at our feet even. So God's Word is a light unto our feet and a lamp unto our path. And I think that's exactly how I feel too. Like the transformation, the way things and the way you process things, and then bouncing it off scripture, but then your daily walk in prayer. These are absolutely great things. Men coming together, I think, is incredible, right? You have men that are, I don't want to talk about feelings, but what's been your experience with some of the breakthroughs? Or maybe talk about ways that these men personally have come alongside you with your sin struggles, or areas of your life where you needed a man that's a business owner, that thinks like you do, that has the same core values rooted in faith. Like, that's hard to find. You don't find that in your neighborhood. So you have to seek that out. You have to build community intentionally. So getting plugged in a group, getting plugged into a small group sounds very intentional. How has it impacted you personally, though, like dealing with your sin struggles or dealing with specific issues in your business where you've needed these guys to really pour in on you?
Yeah. Yeah, there was so when we were really grinding and things were like, I was working all the time, my wife was working all the time, we weren't seeing each other. Like, our marriage was in a very challenging spot, and the guys that I was with when I was explaining like what was going on, I wasn't even doing a great job explaining it because I was like ashamed of how much I was working and what it was doing to our marriage, but they could kind of see through what I was saying, which was wise counsel. And so basically they were just like, it has to stop. And one of the biggest things it did is it made me, like, I was working a job downtown while also working these restaurants. My wife was working the restaurants all the time. And like, financially, I didn't feel like we were at a point like, okay, we can get rid of my salary job and I had the benefits. And these guys were just like, you got to dump the job. Like, you just got to do it. And it was one of those times where I was just so hard clinging on to, I was so afraid that
Fear.
yeah. And I was like, what if this happens, that happens? And they're just like, it doesn't matter. Either you have your wife or you don't. And so
that was impacting your marriage?
yeah. Yeah.
And you knew it, but weren't like, how did you separate between this is going on, but not really taking it serious? These guys, they could sense it in your own words.
Yeah. And there was other factors that were going on. My wife was coming home, and this is no shame to her because this is truly my fault, but it was like, she'd start having like a bottle of wine all by herself. And like, when we wouldn't really even talk. And I was noticing that she was kind of self-therapy medicating through, alcohol.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, we are not connecting, and we're
And you had
like,
kids at this point? No kids.
point.
Okay.
But it was just like the spiral was starting to happen.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we didn't get to an absolute
Train wreck.
point of no return.
Yeah.
But that's where it could have gone. And it probably would have, had I not had guys that were like, you just have to prioritize these things over whatever you think is important. If you think financial stability is important, your wife's more important. If you think, because our home life too, like, we were also living above the restaurant in an apartment and whatever. And they were also ones that came in and were like, you can't live there. And I was like, this is how I make it work. This is how I can go to work.
Right. This is how I get all this extra time.
This is how I get it done. Yeah. And they're like, I don't care. Like, you have to be able to
separate it.
And so, like, we ended up moving, and that was hugely impactful for us. But there was also a thing that it was very tough to make that decision, because there's all kinds of ramifications that come along with it.
Oh, it's complicated.
Yeah. And so it's all of these things that they were able to point out in my life that I couldn't figure out myself have led us to a point where and a lot of it is just prioritizing relationships and family over the grind and hustle. Yeah. Right.
What really hit the bottom line, though, it was like, you know what? So those guys sensed it, but like now it takes action, right? So one thing is awareness. And I think it's a common theme in the AA space, right? Is first to admit you have a problem. I'm sure even for men, like going from some guys bringing this to your attention, calling out your blind spots, that's great. But then saying, all right, I have this information. What am I going to do with it? Because I know for me, there's two sides of me. There's the side of me that says, I want it. I'm going to go after it and go get it. And there's the side of me that says, I think men can relate. It's, I want it. I will go get it, but I don't think it's impactful. I don't need it. I don't need to change. I can change if I want, right? Like addicted to tobacco or alcohol, like admitting there's a problem, but then actually starting the next step. So for you, what did that look like? Did you have to do anything different? Sounds like you made some actions to move.
Yep.
With you and your wife, what happened there with like, how do you reconcile not being around and this resentment that maybe was building? What happened there?
Yeah. Yeah. We had to go to counseling.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I love guys. So even in that example, that was something you had to do that was hard. It took a step.
Yeah.
Who brought that up?
The guys in my life.
Oh, and they're like, you got to get a.
Yeah. They were like, you need a counselor.
And you're like, no, this is what I'm saying. There's a side of me that says, I don't want to go do that. That's hard.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think you always think you can fix it or it's not that bad or, okay, this was a mistake, but we can rectify it. And the reality is relationships are hard. And I think this is also a thing I didn't quite understand is that like every decision you make has a alternate reaction that like you're not aware of. And
a consequence, positive or negative.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Every decision. And it can be the most benign decision, whether you spend time here, you're not spending time elsewhere, or whether you invest here, you're not going to invest elsewhere. And unless, especially when you're married, what the other person is genuinely want. Because I think that was probably the biggest thing is like what we both wanted were completely different things. Like my wife just wanted to be around me. I wanted to provide for my family and build. And it's, that she like doesn't care how much gets built if I'm not around. Right. And I care how much I build if she's not around?
Right.
That's the thing that I was failing to realize is like, it all means nothing if I don't have this. And that's where like counseling is helpful to have those conversations. But
like a translator, it's like literally going to another part of the world where they speak a different language. And sometimes it's just so frustrating for your wife and yourself and myself. I still deal with this every day. And we're so opposite sometimes, both men and women, but also our own spouses.
Yeah.
That even the smallest of intentions coming out with the wrong tone. And it's, if we have that facilitator there, oh, how helpful. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Looking at counseling as a way of taking a next step to improve your life. Was your marriage a crap hole? Was it at the bottom of the barrel? Or was it like, because I think that sometimes there's a stigma around getting help, that you have to be the lowest of low, that you have to be at the bottom of the bottom. And I think it's far from that. Yeah. I feel like every day we have to take an action, a small action towards Jesus. If that's what we believe, that to follow Jesus means the old of us have died.
Right.
And so it's about improving. What do you think is keeping men back from like being okay and open and willing to be vulnerable, to take that action?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think culturally men aren't supported in the way that I think Jesus created marriage and relationships to be. Truly, Jesus and God and the church being the bride and the bridegroom is like the picture of what was intended for marriage. And in that, it's meant for men to be vulnerable and emotional and understanding. And I think as a culture and society, it's not easy for men to feel like they can open up or be vulnerable or express emotions. And I'm not saying like I have market corner on this. I'm not an easily emotional person, but I'll see a movie and I'll tear up or whatever. And I think it's hard to ask for help. I think social media, you see that you get the highlights of people's lives and you feel like you should be that. And there's a way that you can get that without needing other people. And unless you have, I think, people in your life giving you the alternate perspective that it's like, actually, you do need help. You cannot do this alone. You need people and other friends, family, counselors, whatever it is, to help you get through. And that should actually be the norm, not the exception. Yeah.
It's just such a stigma, right? To think about that and willingness to admit it, willingness to get help, the lack thereof. And even the things like I would say, oh, it's not so bad. Like for me, in some ways, I'm so excited about continuing to improve my life and my wife knows about this. But on the flip side, we still have blinders. We still have blind spots. Even just today, I was briefly telling you about the anger that I deal with sometimes. It comes from frustration that my kids aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing or what I want them to do or how I train them to do. And to a point where I had a son called his mom and said, I need you to come here, having a tough time. And bottom line was as simple as, I'm scared of my dad. He's going to be mad at me and upset with me and do something if I don't have math done. And he was frustrated at the math assignment today. Well, I failed to realize that he had missed the 2 previous ones and he got away with it because I didn't push him. And so there's this really fine line between discipline and knowing what you have to do and having someone be there to hold you accountable. But then if you keep practicing that, we learn. Whereas humans, we are not simple robots. We are very complex. Mm-hmm. So it's so cool to hear someone talk about that. And other factors too, I believe. How do you believe when you think about health? And I feel like it's more than just physical health, right? We have mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, relational. We talked about relational. We talked about like mental health, emotional health, financial health around business. But what about like physical health or sharpening that and then prioritizing time and thinking about just your own stuff in your mind that you need to work on. So every day is a struggle. It can be, but where do you focus? So when we think about our health, how do you think health can impact all of us? One area is deficient. We make it up in another area, but is that really truly holistically healthy? I don't know, but it's such a struggle for men, I think.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm by no means an expert. I have 3 young kids. And so finding time for the physical health specifically that's one that seems to always fall by the wayside for me. I've told I jokingly tell my friends like, all right, I'm going to be out of shape for like 7 years, but then I'll be back, which is silly, but it's because it's hard to find that balance. And I think a lot of life is that like if you find yourself making up for different areas. So if you don't have time for physical health, then you're going to work more and you're going to try to focus on financial health more. And if you're whatever, and so everything has a counterbalance. And it's the body is weakness. Like you can find a lot of times like athletes will get injuries because one part of their body is weaker than the other. And it gets exposed when you get under stress. And that's probably the bigger thing is like that those types of exposures really happen once you have stress and something is like pressing in on it. And so I'd be happy to learn from you more about that because I don't feel like I have that balance quite understood because it almost feels like a whack-a-mole game, right?
And I think that's life, right? You could probably look at your emails. What would you say? How many emails you get a day? How many text messages? How many Facebook posts or LinkedIn posts or Instagram? Like we see all of this stuff, right? And people asking things from us, telling us to do things, our kids, our wives, the world, right? And I haven't figured it out either, but I feel like I've made a lot of progress. But for me, you mentioned something that stuck out is finding the time. And so finding the time isn't like finding a quarter under a couch cushion, but it can be because you've allowed yourself to be in present mode, right? To literally pull up the cushions and build a fort and find a quarter with your kids. And so a simple recommendation, and this is what I've heard and practiced in church, and we talk about the area of money, right? And so does it work if we simply start spending the money and then maybe we save if there's some left over and maybe we give or help out and give to the church after we're all done?
Right.
And I think if we do that, we end up saying, oh, there's not much here to give. And so I feel like that's with time. So we have 24 hours in a day. That's finite. The difference is with money, it's actually not finite. Your budget might be, but your ability to create income is still there. So same idea applies with money though. If you know your budget, start with giving your first fruits. So take your 10% or whatever it is you give. If we take that away first, that leaves us with the opportunity to be focused on the future as well. So to save, but before we save, we have to make sure our bills are paid, our needs are met. And so there's that balance of prioritization. And so I feel like it's give, save, and then spend. And if we do that, we just end up spending less and God doesn't get the shaft. Because at the end of the day, what does it mean to be a steward? It's what? Being responsible for the resources we've been given and time, our money, and our talent. And so how we use our gifts, how we use our money is helpful. And time is that one. So curious your thoughts. Do you have any organizational?
Yeah. Dovetailing off that, God talks about wanting the first fruits.
First fruits,
and you see the Israelites, like when they have the harvest, they give the first of their harvest. And then actually like what they have left over, they let people like go through the fields and actually take. The people that are needy, they open their fields up. And so I think that's a good picture of what God wants from us is he wants our first fruits. He wants our best. And because you're right, it's if you wait until what's left over, you're going to find that it's nothing.
And maybe I don't get to go to a movie this week, or maybe I don't get to go do something fun, as opposed to giving your first fruits first and not have to worry about the leftovers, because that's it. That's beautiful. Great illustration. I think that's super hard to practice too. And it comes down to the tools and combination of things like automated giving. Oh, who would have thought? We have our credit card, set it and forget it. And that's for a reason. So we don't forget the most important things. So dovetailing on your dovetail of that. So let's reverse engineer. When you wake up in the morning, or 24 hours are spent, where do you spend your time? And do we just fill our time with the randomness of the day? Or are we intentional about designing a schedule that allows us to get our first fruits in, and time with our wife, time with God, time with our wife, time with our kids, then start our work day? And even that, I got to a point where my work day started, sorry, I can't help with the kids. I can't take kids to doctor's appointments. And so it's been extra hard, like to be able to build in buffers. So for me, we really don't work that long. Like 3 to 4 hours a day is where we're maxed. So if we just decide how to use that time, maybe. What's worked for you in that though? Finding these buckets where you're most effective in different ways.
That's something that, especially in entrepreneurial world, it's like the key to life, I feel, and I tell my wife all this all the time, is expectations.
Totally. Communication, expectations.
I said, if you keep your expectations low, you'll always be happy.
100%, right?
But we have basically this plan that essentially from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I am working. And so what that means is, because we were struggling with that thing, every time bleeds until kids get up, we got to get them ready for school. Then there's time with my wife. There's trying to read the Bible and trying to get your mind oriented. And it just comes at you right away. I know people talk about not checking their phone when they wake up, right? I can't do that. I have to check right away.
No, it's incredible. My wife's first thing, in her bed, she's doing her devotional. And I'm like,
I'm responding to text messages, emails. It's terrible. It's a terrible habit, but that's how life comes at us. So this whole 9 to 5, Monday through Friday thing too is helpful, because also it's like, I also need recharge time too. And so I like to golf. I like to go to lunch with friends. I like to whatever. And as long as I fit it into the 9 to 5, I don't need to ask. Because before it's like, hey, can I go golfing? And then there's always this resentment, because it's like, I need help with this and you need help with, and I haven't gotten time to do that. And so I've found ways to now fit time both to work, but then also time to fill up within that 9 to 5, so that when I do come home at 5, I can be more focused and dedicated to intentionality with the kids, intentionality with my wife, and really putting that expectation together is what's been super helpful. I'd say almost like transformative.
Oh man. And I think that's the key word. But I'm guessing as an entrepreneur, you have demands that come up outside of 9 to 5, right? Probably from 5:01 all the way to 8:59. And so on the flip side, your wife, your kids may need you during the 9 to 5. And so the trade-off, right? So maybe one last thing would be for you to think about how you prioritize that, or how how that written rule and discipline of that schedule and expectations is allowed to change for the circumstances that make sense. Because that's it. Life it always has the ebbs and flows.
There's always exceptions to the rules. And I think as long as you can have the right priorities in terms of what actually matters, that's where you start seeing the family resentment, where dad is constantly putting work over family. And it's because he has that inflexibility to change and modify essentially what he believes most. So.
And that's the difference, right? 9 to 5 used to be so bad. But if you have this framework for allowing for your work time to be work time and your home time to be home time, we can show up with our head in the game. And I feel like going back to that is huge. Shut the phone off if we can. Good discipline. Great stuff, man. I appreciate you dropping, nuggets around areas of your life and struggles, what's helped you through that. On the flip side of the transformative nature and really just looking back at what you have and the future of your purpose and what you want in life and your goals. But how do you practice gratitude now? Because they say gratitude is the antidote to negative emotions and a neutralizer of envy. It's the neutralizer of hostility or worry and irritation. It actually does something to our brain. So what would you say as we wrap about just being grateful and how gratitude plays into your heart as a father, your heart that we know of the Heavenly Father. What would you say?
Yeah. I'd say there's two things that come to mind. The first thing is, well, one, I've been blessed just naturally with a positive disposition
You
and
lucky
a grateful
dog.
heart. I know
You're
it's in
you're a
me.
half full guy.
Yes, always. I wake up, I don't even need coffee. I'm like ready to go. I'm just excited to be alive.
The
Like,
test is, does your wife attest to this?
I think she would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she would.
Yeah.
She needs coffee though. She loves coffee. But I feel like when I became a Christian, the biggest part was honest, like truly giving glory to where it's deserved. And there are times where there are times where will feel like ungrateful, or like grumbling, or like I deserve something that I'm not getting. Right. And what is helpful and what I try to practice is like being grateful for even like the smallest things in life. There are little things like I'm trying to find a parking spot, and there'll just be moments where I'm like the perfect one opens up, and I'm just like, and I literally be like, Lord, thank you. That's so nice. Like I can just pull in and go. And it's like, the question comes back to, does God care about a parking spot? And you're like, I don't know. Does God care? What he does care about is that every little thing is ordained in your heart. Yeah. And who you give glory to. And it's, so there are little things that can be practiced like that. And I do find that helpful, where I'm like, God, thank you for this meeting, or thank you for that. And when I feel like I do that, I'm actually like, I feel better and I feel more in tune with the spirit, and I'm walking in what God has for me. The second thing that I think, and this is, I totally heard this on like some motivational speaker, like Instagram thing, but it stuck with me. And it's that like, all right, so this guy's, you wake up, all of a sudden you're just given $10 million that day. It's like, how do you think your day is going to go? You're going to be the happiest, like all kinds of stuff could happen to you, but you're probably still pumped because you're like, I just made $10 million today. And there's all the things that means: freedom for your time, freedom for your family, all kinds of stuff. Then imagine someone gave you $10 million, but they're like, this is your last day on earth. That would change your day quite a bit.
Wow.
Right.
Right.
And if you had the option to say, we can give you $10 million, but this would be the last day on earth, or you can just go about your life normal, what would you choose? And I think all of us would choose, I don't want the $10 million. Like and so what that means is that every day you wake up is actually worth more than $10 million. So if you think you're not getting what you deserve, or you don't have enough, or these things aren't laying up for you, just remember that every day you wake up is actually more valuable than 10 million.
It's a gift.
It's
a gift from God.
Yeah. So you're already honestly rich and blessed because simply for waking up. Yeah. And I feel like if I actually took that mentality and truly had that thankfulness and that gratitude, God, thank you for the gift of another day. I don't even want, no amount of money essentially is as valuable as giving me another day to do the work that you have for me.
That's very cool.
Like I try to keep that mentality. It's hard, but like thinking about that analogy, it's, oh man, that there's a lot of gratitude just being alive, essentially.
So true. And we face the worst of the best. It's easy to blame someone, and it's easy to say we did it. And that relies on circumstances most of the time outside of our control. And then the circumstances that are in our control aren't actually even in our control. And so here we live life in this rat race of a blur between all of the above. And so a simple practice of gratitude, not only is it great for your mental and emotional health, because literally the endorphins and whatever the serotonin or dopamine levels that would be controlling that part of your brain are released. And I feel like that allows us to really be just super okay with whatever happens. And to get to that point to say, God, I don't know what's going to happen today. I don't know how I'm going to make it, but I trust you and I follow you and guide me. Like that takes a lot, right? To think it's on our own strength, but the reality is we can't do anything without him. So thanks so much for your time. Yeah. I loved hearing the stories. Being vulnerable is part of the job, I think, as men, and to lead our wives and to lead our lives, we need to look to where the one who created us to learn and to grow and to become a better version of ourselves. So thanks for being vulnerable and sharing, and appreciate you on the show.